Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm JD Davidson. It wasn't that long ago that we published a story at the Center Square about a lawsuit challenging the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources rule that basically banned guns anywhere near water. That lawsuit seems to be over now. Joining us today is Ben Yount, Wisconsin contributor for the Center Square. Ben, what happened to the challenge and what is DNR planning?
There was no trial. This was one of the ones where the lawyers got together and said, yeah, I think that we can drop this. We can come to an agreement here. And the Department of Natural Resources has agreed to repeal the rule that all but banned carrying guns in many parts of the outdoors here in Wisconsin. And this started, as we wrote in the story, with a ban on using pistols to fish. I know that you wouldn't think that you'd need a gun to catch a fish, but when you go and it
might make it easier.
Well, it would certainly be a lot more fun. You could take out your frustrations on the lake when there just aren't biting. But this was for sturgeon or muskie, the big fish that can bite. And I'm not a fisherman, so I had to have fishermen explain this to me, that you sort of yank it up out of the water, you shoot it in the head with a .22, then it's much easier to get it either out of the fishing hole or get it onto the boat. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets flopped into the lake. But years and years and years ago, Wisconsin said, oh, no, you can't do that anymore. That's not sportsman-y. Don't shoot the fish. And from that came this ruling. It goes back to 1999, where the DNR said you can't have a gun in anywhere that you could potentially use it to fish. And as that became more and more enforced, what it meant was you couldn't have a gun in the woods in Wisconsin because you're near a lake or you're near a river or you're near a body of water where you could possibly fish. And that's a huge amount of northern Wisconsin.
So a lake, a river, correct me if I'm wrong, but it included like streams or
smaller tributaries. Yeah. Anywhere that you could potentially fish, you couldn't carry a gun. And outdoorsmen, including the guy who was at the center of this case, said, look, I'm walking around the woods in northern Wisconsin. There are bears. If you get far enough up, there are wolves. And while I may be able to have a rifle, I want a pistol strapped to my hip or strapped to my chest so that if I have to use it to defend myself, I can. And that's where Will stepped in, said this is a violation of the Second Amendment. You can't just simply say, well, you may possibly at some point kind of use this gun for something we don't want you to, so you can't have it at all. That's not the way that it works. Now, to be very, very clear, the end of this rule, and that's going to take some time, but the end of this rule doesn't mean that you can start shooting fish again. It's still completely illegal in Wisconsin to shoot a fish, but it's no longer against the rules to carry a gun while you're near the lake or even on a boat on the lake.
While this may seem silly to some people listening to this, there's such a broader theme to this with a government agency enacting a rule which basically is law without becoming a law. And that kind of over-regulation, unchecked things that tend to happen. And while it may seem silly about carrying a gun near water or shooting a fish, the broader aspects of this are critically important.
The promulgation of rules. That's one of my favorite State House sentences. But no, you're exactly right. That while this is a victory for the Second Amendment and a victory for outdoorsmen in Wisconsin, this is also a victory against the administrative state. If Wisconsin lawmakers had wanted to ban you from carrying a gun near a body of water, they could have passed a law, gotten the approval of the governor, and turned this into an actual law. But that's not what happened here. Bureaucrats at the DNR decided that they wanted to do this, and they went ahead with a rule. They never asked what the people's representatives thought. And so this is part of that growing creep of, well, the government said you can't do this. Well, who? Well, the government, the agency, the department of this and that, the state office of that and this. And that's a problem, as Skylar Croy, the lawyer who handled this case for Will, told us in an interview, that this is a problem not just in Wisconsin, but across the country, that you have seen the bureaucratic administrations really expand their power. And when the government expands its power, it means fewer freedoms for the people. And so you're right. While a lot of people are going to chuckle and say, you don't get to carry. How many guns do you need in Wisconsin? This is as much a victory for the rule of law and not just the rule of bureaucrats as anything else. Right.
It's similar to taxes. The more government charges you for taxes, the more you're going to pay. Prices never go down. Laws rules don't. The more power you give a government agency, it's never going to give any of it back.
As I read the book to my children, and as I say all the time, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. And then. And yeah, you're exactly right that when government agencies say this is our power. Now, look, not to get all civics 101 Constitution Ben, but if you want a law, there was a cartoon in the 70s that talked about it. I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill.
Absolutely love American Rock.
Capitol Hill. And that's the way that it works. That if you go watch the other one, 3-ring government, 3-ring circus. There's not a 4th ring for the administrative state or the lobbyists. But that's the thing, is that these are reminders. And this is the constitutional reminder that it is the lawmakers who make laws. That's why they're called lawmakers. The people in the agencies are simply there to do the staff work. They're not there to decide who gets to do what. They're there to file papers, to do the double checks. And that's the extent of their power. They can only do what the legislature allows them to do. And the legislature never said, go ahead and ban guns in most of Wisconsin.
An interesting and important story. Ben, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.